is that? Hello and welcome to Squatchspot.com. I'm Darren Smith, and today we are in the geographical center of California. Why, might you ask? Well, it just so happens that the geographical center of California is in the city of North Fork, California. And as you recall in our last episode, I had received numerous reports from the locals in Prather that the Sasquatch was being spotted in North Fork. Looking at a map of North Fork and the surrounding area, I was not surprised at all that the Sasquatch was being spotted in this area. First, there is an abundance of water in the area. The elevation of Huntington Lake is just a little over 7,000 feet, and there are a number of sightings reported in this area. Shaver Lake is very near my top secret Bigfoot research area, and it is also near where I had my sighting. And it too has a number of other documented sightings. Bass Lake, of course, is close to where I am based, and it is also where I've been conducting my winter surveillance and investigation. Mammoth Pool is an area that I am unfamiliar with. However, very credible sources suggested that I focus my summer investigation in a nearby area. Redinger Lake is another large watering hole in the area for any animals that might be trekking through. North Fork is situated nicely at the base of a very impressive ridgeline, and it receives an abundance of year-round water from the many surrounding lakes. Here is a section of Road 426 where the number of roadside crossings are being reported, and it is also the area I've been conducting my winter investigation. To give you scale, Bass Lake to Shaver Lake is only approximately 16.21 miles as the crow flies, an absolute walk in the park for a Sasquatch. Investigating the North Fork area, I was very impressed. There is a ton of evidence that supports that Sasquatch like to follow waterways while navigating through an area, and there are numerous rivers in the North Fork area. In fact, one of the sighting reports I obtained from the North Fork area involves a Sasquatch being spotted along one of these nearby rivers. And also a number of these rivers in the North Fork area run off of Goat Mountain, and this is very intriguing to me. Why? Well, Goat Mountain is the backdrop of my investigation area along Road 426, and it is the same area I captured that very compelling FLIR footage. This area is where the homesteads are located, where there are a number of orchards, farms, and hen houses, an absolute Bigfoot refrigerator. And the trek from this area to North Fork is only a little over 7.5 miles. Arriving into the North Fork area, I decided to head into town and see if I could drum up some reports from the locals. And what better place to start my investigation than at the U.S. Forest Ranger Station. Rangers are always well versed on the flora and fauna of the area, and they are always willing to make conversation with outdoor enthusiasts. Also, these stations have an abundance of area information, including detailed maps and information on the various trails in the area. While at the ranger station, I had an amazing conversation with one of the rangers. We spoke for nearly 2 hours, and she was very informative regarding the area, and she gave me keen insight into where I should focus my efforts. Departing the ranger station, I decided to continue my information gathering reconnaissance, so I headed over to the Sierra Mono Cultural Indian Museum. However, unfortunately, the museum was closed for remodeling. So I decided to head back into town and see if any of the locals had any information. After beating the street for quite some time, I discovered that the locals that I encountered were not well aware of the Bigfoot sightings in the area. However, many of them were very engaging and supportive of my efforts. One discovery I did make, however, was there was a tribal reservation not far from town, and they welcomed visitors to their general store. I visited the store and made conversation with the shopkeeper. However, he didn't seem versed in the local legend, and our conversation quickly moved to other topics. Having spent a considerable amount of time in town, I was anxious to get out into the field, so I hopped back into my car and decided to do some exploring of the area. North Fork, in this area of the Sierra Nevadas, has had a long and interesting history, and you can still find many relics from the past here, like this flume that was used to transport logs back in the day when logging was the major industry in the area. One thing I noticed just by driving around the North Fork area, this place is squatchy, and there's plenty of food, water, and shelter. As you can see, the terrain is quite rugged and the vegetation thick, so it will be very difficult for a researcher to investigate this area. However, I don't think the Sasquatch would have any difficulties navigating this terrain, and I think they can do so undetected. Okay, I find this interesting. We are just outside of the city of North Fork, and what I find interesting is there is a lot of credible evidence out there that supports that Sasquatch likes to use waterways when navigating through an area. And there's also been a bunch of reports out there that Sasquatch has been spotted poking around power plants. What I find really interesting is just up the river here, I discovered a hydroelectric power plant. So I've spent most of the day over in the North Fork area doing some reconnaissance and a little investigating. I will say that area is squatchy. The amount of water that they have at that elevation, they were at approximately 2,500 feet, which is really low considering the area was very thick vegetation, it was very thick forest, plenty of water. There was all the rivers down there were full power. They had just surprisingly amounts of water. So I'm really excited about the North Fork area. And not only am I excited about that area, is it does eventually pour down this ridgeline behind us here, and this is Road 426. This is where I captured that curious image on the floor that evening. I'm very excited about this area. The only problem, I received a lot of information from very credible sources on where I should focus my efforts in this investigation. Because at this point, it's really a needle in a haystack. The forest is so huge. I was very surprised to see so much untouched wilderness back there. It's just rugged country, just unbelievable terrain, and it's ideal habitat for a Sasquatch. There's plenty of food there, there's plenty of shelter there, and there's plenty of water there. And I really am excited about it because it does pour down this ridgeline behind me, which ends up at Road 426 and heads up into this area where those homesteads are. And there's a lot of orchards back there. There's lots of farms. So there's a lot of food back there. So very intriguing. I'm very excited to be back out in the area and with this new information that's coming in. And in fact, I just met a local who does a lot of backcountry trekking. And he told me if I was looking for the Sasquatch to go to a particular location. The location he rattled off happens to be my top secret Bigfoot research area that we were just at on our last episode. So this guy definitely knows his stuff. He does a lot of solo trekking up in the wilderness here. He grew up in the area, and he's an avid outdoorsman. He does a lot of several night kayaking trips. And he knows what he's talking about because the locations he rattled off where I should be focusing my efforts are the locations, the same locations that other very credible sources are encouraging me to investigate. But I did decide to swing down to the Road 426 area just to kind of take a look around and see what we have going on. I arrived here pretty late. And so I didn't have an opportunity to really look around for any sort of physical evidence. It's just too dark at this point. But it is exciting to be down here, and I might stick around a bit longer and break out the fleur and maybe do a little trekking down here. But I'm kind of getting the impressions that it's still too kind of early in the year for the Sasquatch to be down at these lower elevations. So I've reviewed all the photographic evidence that was acquired on my field cameras from this past year, and I have to admit that although we did have one interesting anomaly, for the most part, I'm very disappointed with the data collection from this past year. Unfortunately, due to the heavy snowfall this year Nevada mountains had this past year, the cameras were pretty much buried from late November until late April, and the snow was even present in photographs until almost June. So that means out of the year, there were 5 months without any footage at all. I do anticipate heavy snowfall up in that area when I'm setting up the cameras, and through my previous years, I've been quite successful. However, this past year had very heavy snowfall. In fact, here's a shot I took from my living room window. I had over a foot of snow on my property for nearly 4.5 weeks, and my neighbors tell me they hadn't seen snow like that since the mid-60s. Next, in an attempt to see who or what was responsible for the rock stacking, I set up 2 cameras so they were facing one another. And unfortunately, a very large tree fell between the 2 cameras, which seriously restricted the animal movement through the area. And although this camera did get some great video footage of animals during the day, unfortunately, at night, its focal range was limited, and during most of the night shots, you can't see what had triggered the camera. And also, this past year, I was trying out a new camera out in the field, And unfortunately, during the colder months, its trigger speed was ridiculously slow, which resulted in blurry photographs during low light situations, and at other times, I was only able to get a very brief glimpse of the animals that triggered the camera as they moved past. So, regretfully, this past year had very few decent triggers, and the large majority of them were deer. Here's a look at the footage that was obtained from this past year. As I mentioned when reviewing the photographic evidence, we did encounter one anomaly that created a bit of a mystery. Reviewing the camera footage on one of the Reconnaissance Hyperfire cameras, I discovered an interesting anomaly that appeared in this sequence. On this frame that was taken at 1:45 p.m. on August 11th shows an unidentified creature partially captured on camera. To give you some scale, here is a photograph of me walking up to the camera the day I retrieved the memory cards. I am just shy of 6 feet 4 inches, and as the shots do appear to be lined up well, one could argue that if the creature was standing in front of the camera, it would have been of considerable size. However, if you do recall, on a previous episode, I had a similar anomaly on one of my cameras. This shot was taken at 11:15 a.m. on February 7th of 2016. And it shows what appears to be a large creature standing in front of the camera. However, when I retrieved that camera, I discovered some interesting marks made on one of the python cables that was securing the camera to the tree. And after a discussion had opened online, it does appear that this creature in question must have been a rodent or perhaps even an owl that got up onto the camera and had damaged the python cable. And as it happened, the python cable that was securing this reconnaissance hyperfire to the tree also had similar damage done to the python cable. So although it would be very exciting to think that we had captured our mystery rock stacker on camera, I'm afraid that the most likely explanation for this anomaly is that a rodent or other small mammal had climbed up the tree to investigate the cable. I believe this mystery has been solved. So, following the disappointment of the footage collected on the camera project this past year, I must admit that I have been thinking that it might be more advantageous for us to move that project down to a lower elevation. For sure it's frustrating to have the cameras buried under snow for such a long duration of time, and it can't be good for the cameras. So I have been thinking about some other areas of interest that are in much closer proximity to my current residence. So I am investigating the possibility of maybe setting up a camera project in maybe one of those areas. However, nothing's been confirmed as of yet, so it's just something I'm thinking about. I do like the location that the cameras are located right now. Specifically, I'm curious to what's going on with the rock stacking. So I don't necessarily want to abandon that area. However, I do think it might be time for us to consider some other areas of interest. So that is something that I am thinking about. Another thing I'm getting excited about is we are moving into the fall months, and there's a lot of evidence to support that the Sasquatch moved down from the higher elevations to the lower elevations in the cooler months, probably in search of food. So that means Road 426, Bass Lake, and the North Fork area are going to be a hotbed of activity, and I'm very anxious to get back into the field and conduct my night surveillance and my investigations of those areas. And for sure I'll be making videos and bringing you guys along with me. So I do encourage you to subscribe to this channel, set the notification settings so you'll know when I'll be uploading future videos. I can't commit to any sort of schedule at this point, just because of the new careering venture that I'm partaking in and just general life. I have been a lot busier than I have been before, so I can't make any sort of promises of when these videos will be uploaded, but I'm definitely excited to continue with the project, and I very much appreciate all of your support and the nice messages you've been sending me, and I thank you again for your patience and understanding, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Squatchspot.com. During the filming of this episode, I met an extraordinary woman in the city of North Fork who was of Native American descent. She and I spoke for well over an hour, and she was well versed in the topic of Sasquatch. In fact, she was friends with a very prominent Sasquatch researcher. She gave me a lot of insight as to what these creatures might be. She, like many in her tribe, believed that the Sasquatch are a spiritual creature. And if you ever want to have an encounter with such a creature, Your motivation has to be out of love and respect. If for any reason you want to harm this creature or to exploit it, it is not likely you will ever have an encounter. I'm Darren Smith, and I'll see you here next time on Squatchspot.com.